Dozens of people were arrested in Los Angeles over the weekend during the second week of protests outside of a Korean spa in Koreatown known as Wispa. Now, this started off with what appears to be a completely manufactured controversy, and I'll give you those details in a second, but unfortunately the situation devolved even further with police using excessive force against the counter-protesters who showed up to counter-protest the anti-transgender protesters who were demonstrating outside of this spa. Now, we gotta go back a little bit. I wanna give you some context because this all started on June 24th, when an Instagram user, Cuba Angel, posted a video of herself angrily confronting a staff member at the Wispa in Koreatown, accusing them of letting a disrobed transgender person in the women's section of the business. Now, I'm familiar with Wispa. I have frequented that spa several times, and I hate the fact that a place that I love so much is embroiled in this controversy, especially with what appears to be a manufactured controversy by the right wing. I say manufactured because so far there's been absolutely no evidence that the allegations by this woman, this anti-trans feminist who was berating Wispa workers, that the incident even happened, right? So she claims it did. She claims that there was a transgender woman who went into the women's area of this spa, was disrobed and allegedly had an erection. And when I first heard the story, I was skeptical of it, mostly because the woman was using a lot of the rhetoric that you hear from right wingers who want to prevent transgender people from using the bathrooms that they identify with, or from playing sports with the gender that they identify with. But now we have a few more details. So there is increasing doubt among law enforcement and staff at the Wispa whether there was ever a transgender person there to begin with. Anonymous sources within the LAPD tell The Blade they have been unable to find any corroborating evidence that there was a transgender person on that day. Similarly, a source at the spa told The Blade there's no record of any of its usual transgender clients on its appointments guest list on the day in question. Treatment at the spa is by appointment only, which is true. I have made appointments there before, and most of its transgender clients are well known to the staff. Now, an important element to this story is the fact that in California, businesses are not allowed to discriminate against customers, patrons, clients based on their gender identity, based on their sexual orientation. We have that statewide law in California. So anyone who wants to come after Wispa over allowing transgender women or men into their business, understand that they are legally obligated to do that, okay? So the woman in question who complained about a transgender woman in the women's locker room, threw a fit, recorded herself as she's yelling at a Wispa employee about it, and then protests ensue. Anti-transgender protests ensue, and then you have the counter-protesters who are responding to the anti-transgender protesters. And of course, it devolves into violence. Police show up. As I mentioned, this is now the second week that the protests took place. Of course, there are scuffles, and the cops use excessive force. A good example of that is the video that you're about to watch, where a protester was just shot at blank range with a less lethal weapon. Let's watch. So there's also some regulations in Los Angeles in regard to how police are supposed to use these less lethal weapons, right? Whether it's the weapon that you saw in that video that uses a foam projectile or beanbags. They're supposed to shoot, I mean, I honestly think this is insane, but they're supposed to shoot at the ground so it ricochets and then hits the target, so it's less, powerful, I guess. But look, the point here is, why did the cop even do it? I mean, you have a counter protester. They're saying, don't shoot, don't shoot. No one is serving as any type of imminent threat. And this isn't the only video evidence we have of the cops using excessive force. It's so incredibly frustrating, Woz, because I think, look, if you want to have a legitimate discussion, a calm discussion about the nature of Korean spas and how some people might feel uncomfortable with a transgender person in the locker room, I think that might be a valid discussion to have, but you can't have that discussion when it immediately devolves into what we're experiencing right now in all of this video surveillance, in all of these cases of police using excessive force and brutality against the counter protesters.
Yeah, and I don't want to cast any aspersions on the police. Far be it for me to ever do something like that, Anna. But from what we know, police officers, the members of the force, they tend to lean conservative, which makes me believe that their sympathies lie not with the anti-protesters, but the people who were complaining and pissing and moaning about trans people being able to freely use a facility in the section of which gender they actually identify with. That's a one. So I'm never gonna be surprised with the cops behaving in lockstep with the worst fringes of American conservatism. That seems like par for the course for me. Yeah, secondly, Anna, you're right. We can't even have a frank conversation about nudity in a freaking, a locker room of a spa. Like, why are you losing your mind over this? I know why. It's because this country was founded on some BS puritanical, principles, and we're still dealing with the remnants of that, unnecessary conservatism around everything involving human genitals, right? Mm-hmm. We're still dealing with that. But my favorite part about this lady lying was that, the trans person had an erection. You flatter yourself, lady. Like, really? Really? That's what happened? Come on.
Yeah, so I try to see both sides of the actual core issue, right? Because there are bad faith actors involved in this, and I think it's important to kind of take them out of the equation in order to talk about, the core issue of, all right, well, there's a transgender woman because Korean spas, here's the issue with Korean spas. I love Korean spas. You're not allowed to be clothed in the women's area. The women's area has hot tubs. It has a freezing cold pool that you're supposed to torture yourself in. Like, you go in the cold pool and then you go in the hot tub and then cold pool and then I don't know why you would do that, but apparently people think it's good for them. Anyway, my point is, you're not allowed to wear a bikini or a bathing suit. In fact, I went there once with a good friend of mine. She was uncomfortable being completely nude, like in the hot tub area, so she was wearing a bathing suit. But the staff told her that she can't do that she either has to leave or needs to wear or take off her bathing suit. And there are kids there as well. There are literally children there because the culture is, hey, we go there as a family, we spend the entire day at the spa to relax and recharge. I love that about Korean spas. But I don't know, is it wrong to take the concerns of some good faith actors seriously, right? If they are there with their kids and they are uncomfortable with that nudity in the locker room, especially when they're with their kids. You know what I'm saying? I don't think that it's wrong to have a conversation about that amongst people who don't have bad intentions. You get what I'm saying? But the conservatives in this country don't want that rational conversation to take place because this is all spectacle for them, right? This is all a giant distraction. It's part of the culture wars that, honestly, it's the bread and butter for the Andy No's of the world, right? Of course, Andy No, he's first, he's front and center as these protests are taking place because this is just an effort to create content, create spectacle, and we don't even. It seems unlikely that the incident even occurred, but is it unlikely for an incident like that to ever occur, right? Not the needless embellishments by the woman. But if there's a transgender person in the women's locker room at the spa, is it possible that that could happen in the future? Sure. But you can't even have an honest conversation about it without this turning into this toxic stew of hate and police brutality, of course.
Yeah, I think the problem with the conservatives is it's always hard to take them at face value when they're presenting their issues. And I'll give you abortion as an example. If a bunch of conservatives were like, you know what? I don't want to see abortions happening. So we're gonna ramp up sex education, contraception, blah, 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 blah. We're gonna do all the things that prevent unwanted pregnancies. No, they don't want that. They just don't want people having sex for sport, right? And so that's often what happens with many of their arguments. I don't know that it's actually, we feel uncomfortable seeing the genitals of a trans person in a spa. It's like, no, I just don't want trans people at spas, period. That's the real issue. So it's often hard to take these people at face value when they make their arguments. And I gotta say, I think people overrate nudity. Honestly, as somebody who grew up with my grandmother, who's from Haiti, in the house, this woman did not care. When it was time to take her shirt off and throw her bra somewhere, that's when she was doing it. Door wide open, she didn't give a damn. And we learned to live with it somehow, and we.
Yeah, fair enough. That's a good point. I do want to go to one more video, and then we'll leave this topic. And I agree with you overall. I think you're right, Woz. You mentioned how the cops tend to be a little more empathetic toward right-wing values. That's definitely the case in California, or Los Angeles, I should say, where the chief of the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department made it clear that they're not going to enforce the new mask mandate, which requires indoor mask wearing. Then there's also the fact that they are brutal, not just to counter-protesters, but also to journalists who are just simply trying to cover what was transpiring that day. Take a look. Just brutal, absolutely brutal. Cops come in, they're supposed to de-escalate the situation, and they do the exact opposite. They call it an unlawful assembly, and then immediately use brutal force in order to clear the area. It's just, and doing that to a journalist who's trying to cover what's transpiring it goes against the rights of a free press, but they don't care. They don't care, and there are no consequences, obviously. They could just do this. Shows like ours will call it out, but when push comes to shove, nothing really changes. Nothing's really done to hold them accountable when they use this excessive force toward people, including journalists.
Yeah, and oftentimes you'll hear police and people who are allied with the police talk about the dangers of the job. I put my life on the line every day on the job, right? Sorry, some of y'all do. Some of y'all do. Some of you guys do actually work in very dangerous neighborhoods. A lot of y'all are just pushing ladies around. That's what you do on a daily basis. Your life ain't in danger. Nobody's actually bothering you. Nobody's in danger of being hurt. You're just being a jerk to some people who happen to, espouse some beliefs that you don't personally agree with them on. That's often what you're doing as a cop. That's why, next time a cop tells you their life is on the line, you should show them that clip.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks. I really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.